Welcome to the New Life Behavior International videocast and podcast series. Presented by volunteer instructors, the New Life Behavior International series is presented in countries globally and in several on the African continent. Courses are available on nlbi.co.za and is absolutely free of charge. However, donations are welcome and completely voluntary. The core curriculum is a comprehensive study to discover a meaningful and personal relationship with God, with the objective to help individuals from all walks of life to be reconciled to God, reconciliation to families and society. The curriculum contains 174 lessons divided into 14 courses and is well received by both Christians and non-Christians alike. All the lessons are available on our website nlbi.co.za, and you may communicate via email info@nlbi.co.za. The outline of the curriculum is explained by volunteer instructor Oscar de Vries.
These lessons will cover the following: a sense of self, a sense of family, parenting matters, true freedom, Christian marriage skills, Christian women, attitudes and behaviors, Christians against substance abuse. There's a family net series, the Seeker Bible study series, Prisoners of Christ, Managing My Anger, Christians against sex addiction, Managing My Finance. In this way, we say welcome to New Life Behavior Ministries.
Good day, listeners. Good to be here with you. Oscar's my name. I'm a volunteer and facilitator for New Life Behavior. And accompanying me is unlockradio.live, who together we're putting together these video casts. And these video casts are just summaries of the lessons that you can download from nlbi.co.za or nlbi.net, where you will find everything that you would like to have, to study, to share, to spread, to reach out. You are absolutely more than welcome. Now we find ourselves now in course 7, and the course is called Attitudes and Behaviors. And today we're going to deal with lessons 10, 11, and 12, which deal with 3 of the attitudes and behaviors. Now, the first of these is the word lust. Now, in the Afrikaans or Dutch language, it's begeer. It means to desire. And sometimes lust is when a desire goes beyond just, as I'll mention, looking at something beautiful. So now we are in lesson 10, talking about lust. Now, what is lust really? Well, lust is, in its simplest form, a desire to commit fornication and sexual immorality. That's where the word is really finding its origin. It has to do with fornication and immorality. Now, lust can be defined too broadly or too narrowly. In other words, we can define it narrowly to say that lust only occurs when another human being is treated as a sex object or thing rather than a human being. Not just a sex object, but a human being is just a thing. But lust is involved here. But lust can also be defined so broadly, on the other hand, that it simply means a passion. That's a good word sometimes for lust. The positive side is the word passion. Passion for learning, passion for life, for a career, for a sport, and even for the Lord. But in speaking of sexuality, it is wrong to suggest that any and all sexual desire is lust. Sexuality is God's idea. God created us. He has given sexuality to all of us as a gift. And sexuality is a fundamental part of human life. So, having said this, it's okay to admire beauty. But when admiration starts to turn into prolonged thought or dwelling or plotting, we step out of bounds. And we'll get to James chapter 1 a bit later to explain this. But first, John chapter 2, verses 16 and 17 says, "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life is not of the Father, but it is of this world." And that's what he's talking about when lust becomes what we could call a negative commodity. You see, sin begins in our minds, not with our flesh. That's where it starts. It starts here. And if we look at the book of James, chapter 1, verse 13 says, "When tempted, no one should say, 'God is tempting me,' for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt everyone." And then verse 14 says, "But each one is tempted when he by his own evil desire is dragged away and enticed." It doesn't apply just to sexuality. Think about any addiction, whether it is gambling or whether it is drugs, whatever the case is, God's not tempting us, but the desire is there. And then it says in verse 15, "Then after desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it's fully grown, gives birth to death." So first, there is a single photo, or there's a single impulse. And then what happens, we start to crave. And what happens is when the craving, the desire gets to a certain point, we want to experience it in real life. So this is called what we say is a gradual brain dirtying process. And in this case, we're talking about lust, but it does apply to other cases as well. Then I want to talk in lessons 11 and 12 about two more attitudes and behaviors. The one is called greed, and the other one is called envy. And as we go there, we've got to say to ourselves today, okay, let's talk about greed first. And greed is connected with the ancient biblical word about the evil love of money. Not money, but the evil love of money. In other words, it's the immoderate, meaning goes beyond moderate, desire for temporal possessions, which can be estimated in money. See, money can buy just about any material thing. The power of money is a security blanket. Money acts as a primary tool for determining self-sufficiency. And when we begin to worship money or the power it brings, there's one word for this, and that's trouble. The world, we need to remember that the world that God created was good, is good. That's important. God didn't make an immoral and failing world. And if we take things God has created and create more from them, those things are also good. So good produces good. Things are not bad in and of themselves. And with this in mind, perhaps we can begin to sort out where the problem exists. Material things in and of themselves are not evil. They are the extension of God's creation. They can have great usefulness in sustaining our lives and making life better. You know, 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 10 ascribes to the problem we have here with greed is the love of money. That's the first problem. You know, as beings that are both physical and spiritual, we have been blessed with the ability to choose where we seek our connection with that which is beyond us. And the choice lies between two far different poles. At one pole, we embrace the one who created us and find our significance and our security in him. In the other pole, we look for security and significance in material things, in the things that we have created and the things that we have accumulated. So we transfer meaning and value to some earthly object, and the object then moves from being just an object to becoming our God. And the object we believe in provides security and significance for our lives. Now, greed is particularly dangerous in a wealthy culture. A dog world encourages upward mobility. In other words, we need to climb the ladder. That's to put it just in an ordinary way. And aggression rather than acceptance. So it's this driving, it becomes a driving force. And so we need to be at the top of everything. In modern life, that's the thing. We need to be on top of everything. And we have twisted that principle to assume that profit brings happiness and brings peace. And this is the frightening thing today, is that there's no limit to the power of greed. And to think that happiness comes in the face of greed, that's the lie. You know, you can't buy happiness. Happiness is a state of being, not a state of position. And whatever we get will soon not be good enough. We will always want more. We will always want something better. And so what's our response? Remember where our real security lies. God is the Lord and the supplier of all good things. Any attempt to find security and meaning in life through things puts us on the path of idolatry. There's another God in our life. There's another overwhelming influence. And we've been created by God. We are saved by God. We are kept safe by God. This is where we find security. Our identity does not come from what we own. It comes from who Jesus is and what he's done for us. Now, detachment from the power of things has successfully been practiced in two ways to detach ourselves from this. Voluntary poverty, that means to give up everything one owns and live simply, a part of the Christian tradition for centuries. That's been part of the Christian tradition for centuries, to just give up what you own and live simply. Or otherwise, stewardship. Stewardship is the recognition that we don't own anything. Our use of what we have should be done in a way that honors God and his call for our lives. And let's talk about generosity. Practicing generosity counters the tendency to hoard, to acquire for the sake of acquiring. Giving to others generously connects us to the way of God, who is the giver of life. You know, giving is an act of faith. It adores God. It gives adoration to God. And then to move on to the word envy. Now, envy was defined by a person called Frederick Buchner, and he said, the consuming desire to have everybody as unsuccessful as you are. Everybody to be as unsuccessful as you are. Envy knows no limits. It can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. Resentment and hatred make envy a particularly deadly sin. There's the tale of two brothers, Cain and Abel. They both had to sacrifice to God, but one was accepted and one was rejected. And when Cain saw that his brother's sacrifice was accepted, he began to experience envy. His anger began to rise. But Cain did a curious thing, because it wasn't Abel that didn't accept his sacrifice, it was God. But what Cain did, instead of taking up the issue with God, he directed his displeasure towards Abel and he killed his brother. You see, envy doesn't look to self or to God for answers, but the object which appears to be the cause of the trouble. Envy can wreak havoc in lives, in families. There are different types of envy. There's what we call jealousy. Jealousy says, I wish I had one of those. Then there's covetousness. I want my neighbor's car. And then there's contempt. I'll let him know he's inferior to me. And then gossip, spreading tales that cut, that hurt. His wife doesn't want anything to do with him anymore. Or also sarcasm, to take down or make another person look foolish. Look at his big ears. He says, if the wind picks up, he'll lift off. He'll take off. There are forms of envy. Envy is deeply rooted in the very center of human life. Envy is a sin that strikes at the heart of humanity. Envy attacks two deep realities and perverts them. Rather than see life as a gift, envy twists the truth to say, I deserve or I have the right to have it all, and that you don't. So envy denies God's good gifts to others, to other people's lives. And so we look down, we look at our social standing at the expense of others. And if I compare myself to other, in other words, if I'm envious, I can become angry and resentful. I may seek to destroy or diminish what other people have. It is like questioning God's right to bless that person, to bless somebody else. Now let's talk briefly. Envy can destroy and leave us outside looking in on the very things that we need the most. The acceptance and the love of God who created us. Our envy can exclude God from our lives. We must turn to God in his presence and the value and realize the value of focusing at what others have. If we focus on God, then our focus on what other people have tends to fade. It tends to disappear. It doesn't worry us. In fact, we are reminded of God's amazing grace. It is then that we realize that what others have doesn't really matter. What matters is our personal relationship with God. And I think if we look at the prodigal son, the lost son story in Luke 15, there's two things there. First of all, the older brother, he wanted to hold on to everything in his life. He couldn't fathom the loving grace of his father. And in a way, you can't blame him because the brother didn't act well. He took and squandered and did exactly what a person shouldn't do. But the other brother is called the prodigal, but he eagerly, in his circumstances, accepted the love of the father. And losing it all may lead us to appreciate that which is of true value. In the prodigal son, the good thing is he realized the value of a home, the value of a father, the value of love, and the value of grace. And the gift of God's grace is his greatest gift. So let's let envy go and have an attitude of gratitude. It's great to have been here today, and let's close with a short word of prayer. Father, lust, greed, and envy. 3 words, Father, that can destroy our lives. Help us to be focused. Help us to understand that these are words that should not be part of our lives. That we need your grace and we need your love, and we need to give your grace and your love to others as well, Father. Help us not to fall into these situations. Help us not to succumb to lust and envy and grace, but let us have an attitude of gratitude always. Bless us, Father, in Christ's name. Amen.
Now, just a few little easy tips. First of all, each lesson is going to ask you to note a few personal thoughts about the question that is asked, and then read the questions at the end of the lesson, but do not attempt to answer them. Then study or read the lesson. Then answer the questions, and then give yourself the opportunity to write some personal reflections. And you are more than welcome to send your answers and questions to info@nlbi.co.za.